I'm just going to talk through some of the key changes in the assessment, and then we'll have time at the end if anyone's got any particular questions for me. So, in terms of what's new for this latest assessment, well, we have a slightly different submission window and timeline. So, those of you who are quite familiar with the assessment, it's roughly this sort of time of the year that we have the submission window open. However, you will have seen that obviously for this year's assessment, the window has been extended to 3 months. And the reason for that extension is very much around the kind of part two minimum standards assessment, which I'll come on to talk about in a bit more information. As always, with our criteria, we update the assessment every year just to make sure that it's reflecting kind of the latest practice that we're seeing. This year, and I'll talk through this again in more detail shortly, there is a much deeper alignment now with the Thriving Work Framework, which we launched last year. The third change is that given the changes to our membership program, so as you know, we've gone from having a sort of global and some chapter programs to having one kind of universal membership program. We're conscious that many organisations may be completing the assessment for different regions. Some are completing it as global organisations, some are completing it for countries such as the UK, and then others are completing it for specific regions such as EMEA or the US. So what we wanted to ensure was that obviously we allow for that in the assessment. So there is a new option to select region. We have some new criteria for global practitioners. We also have the Part 2 minimum standards assessment, which I'll come on to shortly. And then I just want to tell you a little bit around the kind of survey platform and the kind of plan for the kind of reporting for this latest assessment and obviously the accreditation. So we start with the timeline. So as I've just mentioned, we will have the window open, or we've had the window open, or we'll have it open for 3 months. So it will be closing on the 31st of October. There have been some exceptions in the past with the odd extension for a couple of days, but we are being very strict this year. There will be no extensions available. So please do plan appropriately, so to make sure that you get your submission in by the 31st of October. In terms of the report generation, so we as a team will then start developing the reports, and that will be taking place over November and December. And our intention is to launch the reports in early January, so probably the second week of January is kind of what we're working towards. As you'll remember, the last year we launched the reports in 10th of December, I think, if I remember rightly. We've decided to delay the reports to 2026, and the reason for that is that some of the feedback we've had from members has been that you're publishing reports in December, we're getting an accreditation badge. So the last accreditation badge would have said 2024. And of course, within a few weeks, it feels like it's out of date because we've hit a new calendar year. So what we've decided to do is to publish the reports in January, and the accreditation badges that are provided to those that reach the required standards will state 2026. So that sort of badge that you may be using on your career literature or on your websites will feel a bit more up to date. And then our intention is to get feedback meetings in Q1 of 2026. Now, we may start making contact with you actually before the reports come out to get those meetings in. For the majority, we are, it's a pretty quick turnaround on feedback meetings, but there are some, and I actually did one not that long ago. So it does show you that sometimes it can be a bit difficult to get those meetings in the diary. So to get the most out of the feedback meetings, we'd really like to kind of get those done in Q1 if possible. So in terms of the criteria itself, we are still aligning to the three pillars and the 10 standards. So I'm just going to talk through very briefly just some of the changes that you might see against each of the standards. So just in terms of what part of the assessment this is for part one of the assessment. So this is the assessment for the central teams. This is the assessment criteria that you're all used to. This is the bulky survey. And there are around 150 to 180 criteria in total in this part. So it's the large part of the survey. It's the part of the survey that counts towards your accreditation levels. So this is the scored element of the assessment, and this is also the element of the assessment which is benchmarked as well. So this is the main part. So in terms of some of the changes, so under pillar one, this is the pillar that looks at your strategy development, and then your communication and engagement. Essentially, what we've got here is we've linked in some of the elements of what was in the global assessment. So what we're looking for here is things such as having a shared definition of well-being, and a bit more detail around how you're communicating. So thinking about, how you're linking that to other activities and days, KPIs, how you're tying those communications into performance. The other thing that we have in this particular standard is there is a request for a kind of a bit of an overview of your strategy. And I've just put it at the bottom there. There are some of these spot checks now appearing throughout the assessment. So in previous assessments, it's been a yes, no. Um, what we've tried to avoid, and we continue to avoid, is we don't want to start asking for evidence of documentation that we review, but we do want, for some of the criteria, a little bit more context. So it may be that we're just asking you to describe something. So, for example, on the strategy, we'll be just having a brief description of the kind of core components of that strategy. This is also replicated in things like senior leadership under standard 2, where we might be asking you to describe the example. So if we ask you about your CEO or your executive sponsors visibility, we might be asking, well, can you give an example of what that individual did? So there'll be a few more of those dotted across the survey itself. So that's one of the areas. The other area that we're building out a little bit is looking at employee sentiment, employee feedback gathering. So we'll now be looking at how that is done from a kind of quantitative perspective, but also a qualitative perspective. So really thinking about having that kind of more nuanced measurement, internally. In terms of engagement for training, this is something that pretty much came up in most of my feedback discussions for the last round. We are extending the time frame for training offering and training engagement. I appreciate particularly those who are in very large organisations that actually any rollout of awareness training actually can take a considerable amount of time. So the time frame for training has been extended from 12 months to 3 years. So that's standard 1. In terms of changes to standard 2, so we are adding some examples. So we're building out a little bit about what your senior sponsor does, in the organisation. So things such as, examples given there, such as active listening exercises, thinking about succession planning in your organisation for senior sponsors. So where you've had an executive sponsor for wellbeing in the organisation, is there a person that is there if that person moves on or, steps down from their role of, leading the network, for example. And then also there's a bit more focus around the engagement of senior leaders in some form of training or education around mental well-being. Standard 3, so this is the standard transparency and accountability. Again, this is looking at how your organisation is, what they're doing externally, so how you're talking about this in the external context and how you're holding yourselves to account. So we're just building on this a little bit in terms of some extra areas in which we've seen organisations participate. So things like contributing to think tanks, undertaking external research, and really looking at also those internal accountability mechanisms. So this is very much about how we're extending the criteria around that kind of external engagement piece. And then ecosystem, this has continued to be one of the most challenging standards. We haven't built on this too much, but we have added in some more, looking for more kind of explicit examples, I guess, of the types of engagement or support being offered to your suppliers. So slightly broader scope for the ecosystem standard. Moving on to standard 5. So again, people management, another one of the more challenging standards in the assessment. What we've built in here is we've added some more criteria around the setting of kind of boundaries for line managers, to what extent line managers are supported to support themselves. So really thinking about line managers' own well-being, thinking about the kind of employee feedback in relation to the I suppose the competence of their line managers in relation to how they look after team well-being, and also the role in which senior leaders are playing in supporting line managers. So very much focused around the line managers themselves, their own well-being, but also how we're using that data really to support that particular standard. The next one is employee life cycle. So there's quite a few little additions in this one. Examples here are just in terms of key personnel. So part of the assessment is thinking about, okay, well, we've had training for general awareness, we've had training for senior leaders, we've got training for line managers, but thinking about key personnel. So this is predominantly those sitting in HR functions, those who I would describe as being kind of on the front line. They might be recruiters, they might be employee relations teams, those who are interacting with colleagues and supporting them, and who may themselves somebody may disclose a mental ill health challenge, or they may be noticing that somebody's behaviour or maybe something linked to mental health. So again, it's just making sure that those key personnel are being supported and appropriately trained. Other things we'll be looking for here around kind of the use of mentoring buddy schemes, a bit more around learning and development, and other sort of policy items such as sabbatical policies, and then just thinking about how mental health and wellbeing is sort of integrated into kind of performance review processes. So there's quite a few extra bits on the employee life cycle. Then standard 7 working conditions. So there's a bit more around use of data in the measurement of psychosocial hazards. We're also looking at kind of fatigue, kind of digital well-being. So that kind of, overwhelm, from technology and digitization, but also looking at kind of, reward and fair pay, and alignment with kind of local wage laws. So there's a little bit more in there around kind of pay transparency and psychosocial health. Opening the dialogue, standard 8. So this is very much around the environment we create, allows people to speak up and openly. Adding a little bit more around kind of measurement on the effectiveness of champion programs, looking more at formalised policies around kind of recruitment, diversity. Also looking at crisis intervention. So that's something that we've seen a number of organisations start to think about, is how are we set up to respond to a person who may be in suicidal crisis. So we'll be looking at more criteria about what organisations are doing to support people in those situations, but also support for champions and individuals who may have dealt with quite a difficult interaction and may themselves require a little bit more support. So it's really about that kind of, in particular, that kind of being more robust with the kind of champion infrastructure. Standard 9, this is health promotion. This was a new standard in the framework. It was a new standard in last year's assessment. Specifically here, this is more for global regional organisations. There's some questions from a kind of global regional insight perspective, and then really thinking about the kind of use of data again. So the kind of tracking of, KPIs and tracking of kind of impact from those kind of health promotion activities. And then lastly, accessible support. So really, again, this is for the kind of global regional organisations, really looking at, how organisations are approaching that. Consistency is often a word that we hear used, really thinking about, again, that kind of sort of consistent access to support across the organisation, and also just building again on that kind of crisis planning approach. So those are the changes in a nutshell. You will have all had, obviously, the list of questions. We will have some time for questions today, but again, please, if you want to just ask me a question over email, then please do feel free just to drop me a quick question. If you're not sure about what the criteria is looking for, I'm more than happy to jump on a quick call and talk it through in a bit more detail. So, geographic scope. So, as I said at the beginning, different organisations want to complete the assessment differently. And what we want to make sure is that when we're providing the feedback and our kind of analysis and our recommendations, is that we're understanding what the region you are completing this for, and where that is. It's also helpful for us in terms of providing that kind of localized benchmarking information. So again, predominantly, the members are either typically kind of UK only or global organisations. So the more information we have about where you're completing this for, we will then be able to provide that kind of accurate benchmarking information. So it does mean in the reports we'll be able to say this is benchmarking information for global, this is benchmarking information for UK, and depending on the number of responses. So if we get, for example, a good number of responses for the US, we'll be able to provide benchmarking information for the US region. So we want to kind of build upon that. So the options you'll get will be, you're a global organisation, you're completing this for the whole organisation, you may be completing this for a region, and we'll provide in the survey, you'll see there are particular regions in there to select, but you may be completing this as a single country, and of course we'll ask you to specify what that country is. And for those global and for those regional organisations, there are some additional criteria. Now, we're calling it the global insight criteria. It's you'll see that in the set of questions. It's very much around measuring the approach to the design of the strategy from a global kind of centralised perspective, and then the implementation of that strategy. So these questions would not be relevant for somebody who is completing it for the UK market only, for example. Now, because these global insight questions are only for regional and global organisations, they are not scored. So again, this is the sort of thing that we will pick up when we're doing the reports, and it will be the value you get from it will be in the feedback and the discussion at those one-to-one meetings. So that's the changes to the geographic scope. And now from a geographic perspective, we're going to talk about the part 2, which is the minimum standards survey. So this, for those of you who've historically completed the UK assessment, this will be a completely new development, a completely new area. Now, this is essentially an optional survey. It is a survey that you can share with local wellbeing leaders in your organisation. So if you're in a regional or a global role, you may have colleagues who are maybe in wellbeing roles, maybe HR leaders, office managers in different countries of operation who are supporting you with the implementation of your global or regional strategy in that particular country. So what we're looking for here is we're looking to provide you with a kind of minimum standards framework that you can share this survey with those local leaders. They will complete the survey, and that information is then provided to you in your single report. So in a sense, it's almost like your own kind of internal benchmarking, I guess, so that you can have a look at, well, what progress are we making at a local level across my organisation? So you may be able to pinpoint where certain jurisdictions are performing very well. There might be others who are not performing as well. So it's an opportunity for you to be able to have a bit of a wide perspective on what's happening in different parts of your organisation, and then you can take that information and obviously ideally you might want to investigate why some parts of the organisation are making much better progress than others. Now, this survey also includes a stigma assessment. So there are some questions in this survey that are really trying to understand, well, what's the local context around mental health in the workplace? What's the local levels of understanding? What's the local health infrastructure like? Are there kind of legal considerations? What's the kind of, how does mental health have parity with physical health, for example? So it's really trying to give us a picture at a local level of levels of stigma. And then that can also be helpful then looking at levels of progress. So you could assume that in countries where there's high levels of stigma, that perhaps the progress won't be as advanced as those who have lower levels of stigma. Now, you can choose to send this to 100 different countries if you're that bigger organisation that you've got offices in 100 countries, or you could select to send it to 5 or 10. It's really down to you to use this as you would like to. There is just no limit on the number of surveys that you send out. This is not scored. So this is very much an information only exercise. So it does not contribute to your overall score. The other thing I would just like to say on these minimum standards assessments is we do not provide feedback to your local colleagues. So the data that we gather from this part of the assessment goes into your centralised report, and we will talk to you about the findings of that. We will not feed anything back to those local teams. And in terms of helping you do this, there was a template email and obviously minimum standards question set guide so that you can share that with colleagues. So hopefully it's all relatively easy to understand. And I would say if you are a global or you're doing this as a region, I would really encourage you to give this a go and see what feedback you get. From doing this with our global members, there was some really interesting feedback we got through this part of the assessment. So it's definitely worth seeing if your colleagues are happy to participate. In terms of the survey platform, this has changed as well. Previously, we used a SurveyMonkey platform. We now have a platform that's provided through an organisation through My Customer Lens. If you're on the call today, I just want to thank members who took part in the kind of testing of that. This does seem to be something that seems to be more acceptable to everybody's kind of IT security. So I'm hopeful that this is working for everybody. Again, if there is any issues in accessing the platform, then please do let me know. We'll do what we can to resolve that. And then in terms of the reports, as I mentioned, they'll come out in January 26, and the accreditation will be dated as 2026 as well. You will receive a PDF report, as you've done in the past, that will contain your kind of scores, the feedback, and also the benchmarking information. But one of the really exciting developments in this latest assessment is that we'll be able to provide you with an interactive dashboard. So this will be our first year of doing this. So it's a bit of a pilot year for this dashboard, but it will allow you to do a little bit more interrogation, I guess, of your data. So it might be being able to look at that by sector, by a country. We'll have to just see, in terms of the information that and the number of responses and countries and things that have participated. But this is our first, go at having this interactive dashboard. It is something that we are keen to develop in future assessments. So we will be coming to get some feedback from members on that dashboard and what you would like to see in future iterations of it. So, but it's a very exciting development. So we're really pleased to be able to offer that. And that's it from me. I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see you all. And then, yeah, if anyone's got any questions, please put your hand up. Oh, Danielle. Hi, Danielle.
Hi,
How are
how are
you?
you? I'm good, thanks.
Yeah,
Long time no see. How are you?
yeah, yeah, very well, very well. How's things? Oh, have I lost Danielle?
Oh no, I'm still here.
Sorry, you moved on the
I'm
screen.
like a bad smell. You never get rid of me. Um, uh, I was just a quick, really quick question. Will that in a parent? Sorry if I've missed it. Will those slides be circulated?
Yeah.
Um, Perfect, thank you. So I was like trying to scribble down as quick as I could, but
Oh
it'd be
no,
really
we'll
helpful if
circulate them.
those
Yeah.
circulated. No, that was really helpful as well. The breakdown of the differences compared to last year's as well, and understanding more about the new minimum survey standards. So thank you.
Yeah. No, you're welcome, Danielle.
Alison, there was a question from Emma Stacey in the chat as well. Emma, I don't know if you're there and want to come off mute.
Hi there. Yes, sorry. Thank you for that. Yeah, so really keen to understand this. There's one of the questions in the support category where you ask about opportunities for disclosure. Now, the sub-question relates to equality and diversity monitoring forms. I'm not sure quite what you meant by that. So if I can get a little bit more clarity on that question, that would help.
Yeah. Well, the equality and diversity monitoring forms, I guess, it might be, and again, you might not have forms, that might be a bit of an old word, but it's just, on your HR systems, if you are asking for information. So you might be asking general kind of demographic data as part of your processes. Typically, it happens at kind of, onboarding people
Right.
or at attraction. But what we're looking for is actually that, mental health or mental well-being is built into those surveys, and that there is other opportunities for disclosure. So it's not just at that one window in time.
Perfect. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I had a question, Alison. Sorry, it's Jyoti. Just on when you were saying for the, I'm going to get the terminology wrong, but with the broader assessment, if we're completing it with a UK lens, but still want the global insights from the bit you were talking about, which is not part of the scoring, is that possible? I would.
Mm, it will, so what will happen is if you check you're doing it for as a country and
Yeah.
as the UK, you won't see the global insight questions on your
Okay.
survey. So that's almost like an automatic rule.
Yeah.
I can talk to my customer lens team about it. I don't know whether there's a workaround, because obviously what we don't want to do is confuse people who don't want to answer global insight questions.
Yeah.
So I mean, I suppose it's really thinking, Jyoti, about, well, are you, in terms of how you're developing your strategy and approach, are you doing this really as a global firm? And if
Yeah.
you are, then I tick the global box rather than UK.
I think so. I'll have a look at the questions, but from memory, and I think this is a conversation I had with Tony, it's some of the questions are really kind of specific in terms of what we're doing. And I think from a global lens, it's hard to answer that we're doing this consistently, because it's hard to gauge that, we would say, yes, we're setting that standard, but are people are putting it in practice, especially given it's the first year. But the UK has been really familiar with this. So we are able to then kind of tick those boxes, and there's an accreditation which actually you want to if we kind of apply this globally. So I think I don't know whether it's an option in a transitionary year, because I don't think it's going to be tricky for us to complete that globally to the same standard, to get the same insights we would for somewhere like the UK, which is more mature.
Yeah, no, I totally get your feedback. Leave that one with me, Jyoti. I'll have a chat with.
Obviously, the global piece is really interesting for me.
Yeah, I'll have a chat with the team, because it might be that there's another way of checking another
Copying
box
it,
to say, I'd like
yeah.
to have those global insight questions. You won't be scored on the global insight
Yeah,
questions,
and
but
that's
again,
kind of
like you say, the feedback's
we want the insights
useful.
of scoring, I think.
Yeah. Okay, well, leave that one with me. I'll chat to the team,
Thank you.
see what we can do.
Probably a
Any
crazy
other?
question, Alison. How long do you think it would take to complete so that I can block some time to do this?
Okay, I would say, I mean, I think the time is trying to get to understand what your response is going to be, because we
Yeah.
would recommend that you talk to the relevant people in your organization about, well, what would you say? I mean, it might be the L&D team or recruitment team, health and safety team. That's going to take you time, of getting time with them booked in, and so you can go through the questions. Once you know what your response is going to be, the actual completing of the survey isn't going to take you too long. So I would say last year's assessment would have taken you around 30 minutes, say, once you've gone through and checking. This year we are asking for those examples. So it might take you, I mean, we're not asking for, pages and pages. I think it's sort of like, max 500 characters or something like that. So obviously you've got to add those in. There's probably around 10 or so of those in the survey. So I would say a good hour, 2 hours, probably completing it online, but it is just giving yourself enough time to speak to everybody you need to speak to. I don't know if others on the call, actually, just in terms of your experience and how long this has taken previously.
Last year, I found it took longer to collate all the info, even if it was only half an hour to do the assessment. It took longer to collate it to be able to say yes, no, beg, or answer it. So I'd put the time in for that, for the stakeholders as well you've got to talk to. But the assessment was easy.
Cool. And then remind me, Alison, we can go in and out of the report, is that right? Or did it all have to be completed in one go?
No, you can, as long as you're using the same machine.
Yeah.
So because it's your IP address, so it'll remember where you are.
Oh, okay. So I couldn't send the link to then Rachel to complete the bits I didn't know.
No.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Cool. Thanks.
Just on that as well. So when I completed it last year, sorry, it's Karen from BDO. When I completed it last year, I actually created a spreadsheet of all of the questions, and then put all my notes next to it, who I was speaking to, sort of, if I was waiting for responses, I sort of project managed it in that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Because I was wondering, because Alison, I think you sent the questions, but I don't think they're editable.
No, it's a
I think it was
PDF.
a PDF. Yeah, because I was going to say if you sent it
Yeah.
like as a Word document or something, we could always then just put the blurb in afterwards.
Yeah, well, what I'll do is I will see if we can get the questions put into an Excel spreadsheet, and then if that's helpful, then
That
so you
would
can go
be
and talk
very
to.
That would
helpful,
be
I think.
really
Yeah, okay,
helpful.
brilliant. Okay, well, I'll
Yeah.
do that, and then we'll share that with everybody with the slides, and then I'll come back on the query on the kind of global insights if you're doing it as a country only response. So totally get that feedback, and maybe for we'll just think about that in particular for next year as well, how we can sort of make that work. Well, so good. Okay. Well, I don't know if anyone else has got another question, but if you do sort of as you're going through, if you do have any queries or questions about the criteria itself and what it means and whether or not your organisation should be saying yes or no, then like I said, I'm more than happy to help with that. So but just I know we've still got quite 6 weeks or so, still feels like a long time, but obviously time does fly. So do let me know sooner rather than later, and we can have a call if needed.